The main focus of this session is going to be a discussion with a panel of representatives of online program management companies. And it's going to be based on data, or at least they're reacting to some of the data that comes out of the CHLOE survey of chief online officers that reflects on the OPM industry and how widely it is used, or what some of the attitudes are toward it. So the representatives of CHLOE here share the presentation of CHLOE findings. Myself, I'm Ron Legon, I'm co-director of the project. Eric Fredericksen is joining the project in the second past year. He'll introduce himself more fully when he comes up here, but he is at the University of Rochester and is their chief online officer. He's also a leader in the OLC online learning consortium, and professor at the University of Rochester as well. And it's nice to have a chief online officer on our team now. It gives us some kind of reality check in our work. And Mughees Khan is our chief analyst, data analyst, who helps design the annual survey, provides us with spreadsheets that break down the data, does more extensive analysis where we need it, and adds a level of common sense to some of the grandiose ideas that Richard Garrett, who isn't with us here today, my co-director, and I come up with from time to time. Our panelists, we have three, but there really are only two here at the table. One of them, Lauren Wright, is unable to be here. She is quarantined with the flu at home, but she will be joining us via Zoom. And in a minute, I will switch over to her so she can introduce herself. But I'd start with the panelists that we have here. Whitney Kilgore from iDesign, and Whitney is the co-founder and chief academic officer of iDesign, and she previously served as the vice president for academic services for academic partnerships. And before that, director of academic technology services at the University of Southern Nevada in Las Vegas. She's been involved with QM since 2008. She's an old friend to QM, and we always love to see her at our conferences. And next to her, Gerald DiGiusto from Wiley.
No, ExtensionEngine.
Excuse me, ExtensionEngine. From ExtensionEngine. And he's worked in higher education, both in the US and in Europe, for more than 20 years. And he previously served as Mughees Learning's vice president for strategy and marketing, director of consulting services at Pearson Education, and managing vice president for research and data at EdUventures. So he has a connection with Mughees company, and many years of experience in the field. Now I will try to get Lauren on the screen and then introduce her. So give me one moment. I think I will do it. let's see if I can figure it out. And what they showed me is working for me. Of course, that happened.
Ron, if you're not able to see me, that's quite all right. As long as you can hear me, that's good too. I don't need to be like the face of that big screen right now.
Nothing like having the flu and being on a
There you go.
Or just some virus that they can't give medicine for.
Okay, now we'll see if I can ever get the other back. Lauren is here with us now, and actually we have a long connection with Wiley. Our publisher standards we actually developed with Wiley as our industry partner. But Lauren has worked in learning design, organizational design, and so on for more than 20 years. She has worked in the corporate learning and development world, where she's designed and managed the development of corporate learning programs. And she is now the Director of Program Development. Is that your new title?
Yeah.
And congratulations on that. And obviously that's relevant to what we're talking about here today. So why don't you start and tell us a little bit about Wiley's approach, and then I'll ask the other two to do the same.
Absolutely. In my role with Wiley, I have mainly oversight of the program strategy of a select group of partners and team members that work with institutional program directors that help shape the practices and processes in the academic services world. That's my main focus, but then as Wiley as an OPM, they're involved from business development all the way through in the student journey experiences to graduation. Ron, I can go a little bit more in depth if you'd like around the world, around our thoughts around what an OPM is, or would you like me to talk about that in a little bit?
I think we'll get to that, so
Okay.
can hold off on that.
Okay.
And now let's see if I can add back where I was, and the answer is no. I'm trying to toggle back. Brilliant. So let me turn to Jerry and then Whitney. You can tell us something about ExtensionEngine and what your role is there.
So ExtensionEngine is, we're focused on building custom learning experiences. We're pretty different from, we often get lumped together with the broader OPM segment, and I think that's appropriate. But both our clientele and our approach is probably a little bit unique. Our clientele, first and foremost, about 50% of our business is in higher ed. The other 50% is predominantly among nonprofits who come to us for our learning experience as well as the services we can deliver around that. But they're all trying to scale their impact through learning programs. So we work with criminal justice programs that have been piloted face-to-face and then looking to go to a nationwide audience. Things of that nature. And I think it's really interesting just bringing across the lessons learned from trying to serve predominantly adult learners in different contexts. And I think that enriches our work in higher ed. Our services are always customized, and we do not take a revenue share, which is often the difference people focus in on. Everything is fee for service. We started off as a custom software shop, and we still have strong roots in that world. We have a development team. We try to use off-the-shelf technology to deliver our clients experience, the differentiated experience they want to, and I think that part is particularly important given the development of the online market and the need to set themselves apart. So that technology is often an important part, but we do use off-the-shelf technology wherever we can, sometimes building tools or integrations to fulfill their specific needs, especially data science programs. If there's particular things they want that'll reflect the workforce, whatnot, or the workplace. We also do instructional design. We have a marketing team that can provide those services as well. And I've joined the company to build out strategy. And this is another real focus for us. And I think it's important to that fee-for-service model. So we know our clients are going to leave us at some point. It's built into the model. We don't sign renewable contracts. So we want to make sure that we can measure our success by their ongoing success. So we've been investing in resources and in services to help them build not just have the right plan to make sure they have a program that's in the right part of the market, but also then build the norms, the governance structures internally, the right policies, the right professional development for their teams so that they can go on and thrive. And take that through many iterations to keep pace with this market, which, as we all know, is very different than it was 10 years ago, and it's different than it was a year ago.
Thanks very much. You'll have an opportunity to get even more detail out here. But first, Whitney, and I should say that both iDesign and ExtensionEngine are sponsors of the CHLOE report. We're not going to show them any mercy today, but we do appreciate their involvement.
No mercy.
Maybe if you don't, we'll pay more.
Okay, Whitney?
Yeah, so I'm really thrilled to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Ron. iDesign started about 6 years ago. Several of us in the leadership team had worked for some of the other big online program management firms, and you heard that in the introduction that Ron gave. We just felt like there had to be a better way. We formed the company on the hypothesis that the online program management firm essentially brings everybody the same black box, and that universities don't get visibility into what happens inside that black box. And so we founded iDesign to be fee for service, to provide great instructional design and increase value to the student experience through focusing on instructional design core component. But we do offer a completely unbundled fee-for-service online program management solution with complete transparency to the university partners. So they can see every spreadsheet, every piece of data. They can start to build capacity inside their own institutions. And so far, 6 years later, that hypothesis has paid off. So our laser focus on student experience is really where we sit in that space. And I think there's been a lot of writing about the online program management space lately, to the tune of Michael Feldstein calling folks like iDesign and ExtensionEngine more online program enablers rather than OPMs. And so I think we sit in an interesting space lately where there's a new conversation unfolding that's trying to kind of separate the rev share model from folks like us.
I think that's right.
Before we go any further, Lauren, is Wiley Education Services a fee-for-service or the older OPM model? How would you describe it?
I would say that we're a very flexible OPM model, and that's where, speaking to both what Jerry and Whitney were saying, the industry is shifting, and you're not always going to have a solid, specific rev share model that has to be in every single contract. As our institutions evolve and really can look at what they're needing, then Wiley is prepared to meet the institution where they are, really based on the amount of risk that they're willing to have and to take. So I think it depends on the needs of the institution, whether or not there is a full OPM where you have from marketing all the way through to enrollment and admissions and supporting those students and academic services, or you have some of that is fee for service and some of that is baked into a revenue share model. I'm kind of getting ahead of some of the questions that I know you wanted us to dig into, Ron, but I think it's really flexible depending on the needs of the partner.
Okay, I wanted to make sure we got that out. So we have one company coming from the more traditional OPM model, but evolving to be competitive and flexible. And we have two relatively newer organizations. You think so? That are pretty much committed to the fee-for-service model. So there in itself, you can see a dynamic. And here I'm sharing a little bit of information from our past surveys. And in those surveys, we probably haven't been nuanced because we've asked about OPMs and we haven't given them a strict definition of what an OPM is. And I think as we go forward, we're broadening that to talk more broadly about external vendors that may follow a revenue share or a fee-for-service model, or maybe even something that hasn't surfaced yet, but will evolve. What we, for those not that familiar with CHLOE, it is a survey of chief online officers at institutions that offer online courses and programs. We're up to almost 300 participants in the third year of the survey. We're hoping to push that even larger as we go forward to learn about the whole scope of the online world in the U.S. We do ask what these chief online officers do, and at least 75% of the respondents tell us that they have an important role in contracting with external providers. So if their institutions are doing anything with OPMs, to use that term as broadly as we are defining it here today, they would be involved and have knowledge. Half of that group, about 41% of the institutions in the survey, indicate that the chief online officer has the chief responsibility, the primary responsibility for this kind of contracting. That's maybe the person that Whitney and Jerry and Lauren would be talking to at some point in the development of a real relationship. A number of the institutions, over 20%, tell us that they have had OPM relationships in the past. And 12%, or a little more than half of that, indicate that they have current OPM relationships. And another 10% beyond that, so that if you add those two figures, you're back up to the 22%, are seriously considering of such a relationship. Probably, and maybe we should have been more specific about this as well, having discussions that could lead to one of those contracts. So from this, we would like to be able to generalize unlimited data that about 20 to 25% of institutions that are doing online learning seriously are interested and open to these kinds of relationships. And we'll get to the remaining 75% and some of their reasons a little later on. But right now, I want to focus on the ones that are using OPMs and where they're using them. So it's been described already that there could be a whole suite of services from marketing and recruitment of students all the way through the learning process, supporting the students all the way through. And you can see them summarized in 5 or 6 headings here. And the colored bars indicate of those who responded that they are using these services, which services they are using or which they rely on most heavily. For example, technical support, it turned out that in our sample, only private institutions were relying on technical support. LMS hosting, further down, it's a combination pretty evenly divided between public institutions and 4-year privates.
The same in enrollment management, which would have to do with, well, a broader view of recruitment and retention of students. Student support and retention, really, that's for currently enrolled students, and you can see that same breakdown there. Two-year institutions are almost missing from this altogether, but in terms of course design, remember from, well, some of you may have heard our talk or read our report, but community colleges simply cannot afford a permanent staff of instructional designers. The average two-year institution may have one full-time instructional designer. And so despite their resource limitations, community colleges, interestingly, go to outside organizations to rapidly develop the courses that they need when they need them. That's what I would conclude from that. So now I'm going to turn it over to Eric to moderate a few questions for the panel related to the positive impact that the OPMs are having on that segment of our survey sample.
Great, thanks, Ron. First, kudos to Ron for pulling this together. I think it was marketing numbers too. I thought it was really interesting. If you just in the media over the last 2 weeks, there's been several stories about OPMs. I don't know if you saw this. The two-year response in Inside Higher Ed. There was another one by many probably know Joshua Kim.
Yes.
That group.
The pros and cons.
Yeah. Right. Why we disagree on OPMs with Ed Maloney. And then that was just 2 days ago. And then, you know, if anybody knows Bobby Bell, used to be at Stevens and NYU. He wrote another one, another piece similar. So the timing is good for this panel, I guess. I'm thrilled to propose and present a few questions to our panel. I think it's because I'm a real life chief online officer. I think that helps. I have good practice in asking these questions because I've been asking all of these questions that are going to be presented. I've been practicing those in my office for many years. I'll start with the first one. Two are kind of related. It is, what value can OPMs add to colleges and university online programs? But I often connect this question with the follow-on, which is basically, what can you do that our institutions can't do? Okay. So I'm going to start with my friend Whitney.
Okay, there you go. So I often think of these relationships as true partnership. And I think if you're going into any partnership, there are things that each side bring to the table, right? And so when I look across the various partnerships that we have at iDesign, our university partners have strengths and weaknesses, and we're able to fill those gaps, and that's why the partnership exists. If we don't have the right strengths to bring to that relationship, then maybe they are working with ExtensionEngine. And even though there's only 25% of folks who want to work with folks like us, that's still more than enough work for our organizations, right? So we're all friends here,
That's
which
absolutely.
is actually really nice. When organizations reach out to us, and that's universities, we're partnered with EDUCAUSE associations sometimes, or even corporations, they're looking for speed to market. And I think that's probably the number one piece, is that we have the resources to throw at a project to move the needle on something and help with things like risk mitigation. Because we have expertise in doing this for other universities, we're able to reduce the mistakes that might be made. The learning curve doesn't have to exist for somebody who's trying it on their own for the first time. They can learn from our expertise. And then, you know, oftentimes when you're taking a new degree program online, you're marketing to a new population. As a university, you may not have the strength to be able to market to that new population in an effective manner. So a partner can do that for you. I also think typically inside a university, there are some silos, right? And so an organization from the outside, you can't be a prophet in your own land, oftentimes people say. Having an organization that you're partnered with to help bring people together around a common vision, a shared success, if everything goes well, and getting people to buy into that vision and know what success looks like and help everybody get on board to execute against that. that project or that plan is really why people look to partner with folks like us in the first place. So that's it. Hopefully
Yeah, I would echo all of that. I think it's all right. The risk management piece and the speed to market come up time and again. I think it's more a question of degree than kind, to be honest, and I don't mean that to be a cop-out, but any institution could do this, but given the pace of the market and the risks of doing so, it doesn't always make sense to do so, especially for newcomers or latecomers to the market, you know? And it provides some insulation, and that's the risk management piece, that surge capacity to get up and running, that ability to bring in expertise, especially expertise that have been tried and true across multiple institutions, which is important in understanding. If you're trying to build this in-house, it's very, you tend to be, you kind of have blinders on. It's tough to acquire some of this at a pretty sophisticated level. You see that sort of most clearly in marketing. There's plenty of programs out there that probably should succeed, but don't for the way they're executed and brought to market. It's just very hard to compete with that variety of resources. The efficiencies of scale too around, marketing to multiple different programs means outside providers often get some economies there that aren't available to an institution that's just starting out. So I think that is really important. Sometimes it's also plausible deniability. An outside party, and I know this from, I'll use an example outside of the OPM. I did consulting for years, and the old yarn about consultants is they're telling you that the time with your own watch. But to be the people out there who are working with your faculty, who are sort of letting them just get out all their frustrations, it's both a more honest environment, and it's also one that means you preserve that political capital you don't always have. It doesn't always work like that, but I have seen that work to some benefit. And especially to the extent that online becomes that sort of a locus of experimentation within your university, having someone else facilitate that originally keeps you far enough away that you can be the honest broker and allows you to do things both that you probably couldn't do, but also do them faster, and also then pull the plug. We all know that about institutions. My background is as a political scientist. I used to study international institutions, how they created. A lot of them don't go out of business because once they're created, they have constituencies. When you do these things externally, especially if it's a big change of what you're doing, it's a lot easier to say, you know what, that didn't work. We're going to absorb it back in. And I've seen that happen. And it still means your investment can pay off in other ways, but maybe not in the way you did that. It's hard to envision that happening if a faculty member has a lead there. There's a lot of too much ego and pride on the line, and that's just human nature.
So a buffer and someone who can operate between factions,
Right,
etc.
right. Because of what our incentive structure is. Yeah.
And thank you both. I would concur around the risk and the opportunity to bring in that expertise that might be missing on campus or fill that gap that's been identified. I think when a school considers contracting with a full OPM partner that's going to be more of a long-term partnership or a smaller or a shorter contracted partnership, I think one of the first things they have to recognize, though, is that they have a need and they can't address this on their own. Schools don't partner with our institutions and our organizations because they just want courses to be out there and without the governance and the infrastructure. This is not about just let me put my course online, and I think CHLOE shows that. It's really about the expertise that we're bringing and that there's an acknowledged gap there, whether it's marketing or it's enrollment services or it's that student support that's going to be able to shepherd through. And I would also echo that I think from identifying that there's that need, the value begins with a strategic plan. We're bringing that to the table and it allows us all to work together to that agreed upon goal, regardless of what the outcome is and the length of the relationship. You're going to have dedicated resources, and that's people and money to help focus the efforts on designing and building strong online degree programs. And along the way, you want to be able to, in your partnership, ensure you're sharing that best practice and the guidance and the recommendations that can be shared throughout the organization. It's not a zero-sum game. I actually like to say I think the sandbox is really large, but it doesn't mean you have to be an expertise in that whole sandbox. And there are ways in which we can start to elevate based on immediate need and then share that across and out. So I think that's the value of partnering with an organization when you identify that you have a need that that expertise or the funding is just not there at the school. And that's okay. I think it's okay that you're there.
You want to follow up with anything, Eric,
No,
on this part? Or go on?
I have more coming though.
You do, right. Yeah, I almost thought I had two similar slides, but this is the other side of the picture, the other side of the coin, the concerns also raised. And as I indicated, generously, maybe 25% of our sample, and if you extrapolated that to the whole industry, you know, that could be 800 or more institutions. I'm figuring about 3,000 institutions that are doing serious online learning in some way. So that's not small potatoes. That is a very sizable market. But then there is this other 3/4 of the market, as far as we can tell, that basically tell us they wouldn't consider an OPM relationship. Now, again, in terms of the expanded definition, the last bullet on this screen indicates that a number of them responded that they are willing to engage in short-term focused contracts to deal with a particular issue or goal that they have. And so as we look at the broader definition of what OPMs are in relation to online learning, there is an opportunity for flexible OPMs to reach an even larger share of online learning institutions. But they also tell us, the majority of them, that they'd rather spend their resources on building internal capacity than on hiring some expertise for the projects, and particularly for the long-term relationship, that they are concerned about the revenue share model, which goes on for a considerable period of time, but maybe not forever. And they have some skepticism about whether the OPM can really demonstrate that they have an impact on things like student recruitment and retention, the growth of an online program, and as a result, in business terms, they question the ROI, the return on investment that they will get. And then finally, they refer in a variety of oblique ways and then directly in text comments to their desire to retain the identity of the institution, the character of the institution, and not surrender that to another organization or to a generic solution that doesn't reflect who they are over their past. So those are some of the reasons they're telling us in response as a follow-up to the question, do you or don't you use an OPM?
Ron, I'll just add that that's a question we're asking again in CHLOE 4, so we'll be able to match institutions out that we still do funds, but perhaps we could bring a match sample.
Yeah, and this is an area where we might see shifts over a relatively short period of time if the model itself is evolving. And this is just a bit of detail on how they responded to the question of who builds your online courses. And it breaks down by a number of different types of institutions there. I won't try to read all the detail on here, but it's obvious that first cluster there, we build our own, is very substantially larger. But if you read, let's see, if I have the laser here. Yeah. If you look at these, Actually, this is the 20% line. So it is not insignificant in terms of the industry as a whole, but it is overshadowed by the tendency to build the courses yourself, whether you're doing a good job or not. So that's still an open question. So here now we'll start on a series of questions, and Eric will lead us through that.
So this one is somewhat straightforward, and maybe you can all relate to the concerns that were raised in Ron's slides. I can understand and relate to some of those as well. Rather than asking you to respond to every single one of those concerns, maybe pick one that you think is most relevant and help us with your perspective on those concerns.
Let me start with the course design. Just that graph, right? I think it's a fascinating data point that we can unpack further, to be honest. Some OPMs actually stay very hands-off in course design. So it's very possible that they say they build their own courses, but they're still leveraging other services. And when I look back at tech support and other things, or even LMS hosting, it might be interesting to find out who's providing those services, because it may not be an OPM, it may be the LMS vendor, right? So there may be some pieces of this data set that we can unpack further. What are we doing to address those concerns? We absolutely think universities need to build capacity. But thinking just about course design, because the slide was up, in order to get a single brand new program off the ground, a typical instructional designer can build about 4 courses per design cycle, right? So maybe with one, and we bring a team of 4 to the table, because you need video post-production, you need graphic design, you need an actual builder in the LMS that can connect all the LTI tools and third-party integrations. And then you need somebody who can work with a faculty member to reconceive their course to leverage the best the technology has to offer. So you're talking about 4 unique skill sets that may not already exist in the university in order to leverage for this brand new program. If you went to hire 4 brand new people in these 4 roles, fully unencumbered staff with equipment and space and benefits, what's that cost versus bringing in somebody to help you build it and get you sustainable so that then you could then begin to operate on your own. So I think, there's a lot of things to consider. I'm glad people are skeptical, because you shouldn't go into a relationship like this without thinking it through, right? But partnerships can be really helpful. I think we saw the slides in the earlier session that instructional designers or teams that are building courses together actually lead to greater student-to-student engagement and student-to-instructor engagement. So if you don't have designers to work with your faculty, perhaps you need that support mechanism. We know that's the best way to get to student satisfaction and student success. So that's just one way that a partnership could help.
Yeah. I'll take the point about efficacy, because I think it's both fair and perhaps unfair. I'll play both sides of it. I think it's true of the whole sector, and I think, this is the argument we've had, any of us who've worked in online for a while, here about face-to-face too. So, all right, status quo requires data too. If you're going to have this argument about quality and all of that, let's do some benchmarking against it, and it's rarely there. I do, however, think because of why, in some ways, OPMs, we probably haven't done enough there. That's just honest. It hasn't been the focus. The market hasn't always demanded it, at least not in a rigorous or consistent way. I think that's changing. I think that's one of the evolutions we're seeing. And I think we're going to move beyond just data, because we're all swimming in it. I think the conversation needs to shift more towards causation. And you're starting to see them play out. What is the role of instructional designers, and what does their involvement do in terms of overall learning experience? How do those support services, and in what ways and when are they having those effects on different student demographics? And that's why these third-party companies like ours are in some ways better positioned to this. Doesn't mean we've done it consistently, bad on us, but we need to, and we're starting to do it, is because we work across these institutions. I think we get a better perspective. We stumble across best practices. Now, applying them to your institution, you're better at doing that. But if that's all you know, especially as you're using online to grow into different markets or compete in different places. That vantage point is pretty valuable and does not exist within your institution. So I think we're pretty well positioned to do that. And you're seeing some efforts. You mentioned Michael Feldstein. The guys at MindWire are starting to do this empirical education project or educator project. And those are the sorts of initiatives that we all need, that we all should be participating in across the industry. But we sit on a lot of data. The challenge to that actually has been for us is not the analysis of the data or finding the patterns. It's because our partners own the data, because we're creating it for them. Often they don't want to share it back because they're wary of what it might show. So then we can't do that work. So, you know, those are some of the hangups there. So I think it's both a fair concern, but it's also one that we're well positioned and need to be part of that conversation around. It can be redirected back at the institutions.
Lauren, can you take a pass at that?
You know, I can, because I agree with you. I think that there's a lot of voiced concerns around leveraging and bringing in an OPM. And I think similar to what Whitney and Jerry were saying, I think if chief online officers, they know their schools and their needs the best at this moment. And if they think their school isn't ready to seek a partnership, then that's fair. But I also think that for as many institutions that are out there, there are going to be different reasons for why one would want to engage with a partner. You know, and I think of my business. I've been in the OPM world now for 12 years, mainly in academic services, but I've touched business development, enrollment services, student support, our marketing, and we seek partnerships with universities that allow us to bring our best to the table and partner with schools that share our values. And, you know, I would share, being a part of Wiley, we are anchored in our culture and our values. And that's where we're not and I think many of the OPM type organizations we are driven by the goal to help students succeed. That is why we're here. And I would share that there is literally a team of hundreds of people behind me that share that exact same passion and that value. And while I may not be sitting in the desk at the school, we are your partner and we are committed to identifying with you. Your school is not Wiley. We adopt you. We come in and take, you know, your institution, we speak your language. And this is about finding the students that represent you and the programs that you want, with the goal of ensuring that they're going to be successful as they go through that, as they go through the curriculum. And that's the overarching mission for an OPM. In my instance of working with Wiley, I think there's also a lot of different organizations out there, and it's critical that you find the right partner. If you need a short-term partner and you want to, and you can find that connection and grow and get yourself to a place where you've had time to build it internally, wonderful. But we have 60 partners that are our partnership, and I know that they would not think that this relationship is unfair. And they've continued to renew, and they wouldn't renew if they thought that this OPM relationship was unfair. And so I think that depending on where an institution is, they may not be ready to really embrace the full need, but as they shift, there's a lot of resources out there that can support them where they need to be and extend their mission and vision as a learning institution.
I just want to echo that because I think it's such an important point. And when, you know, what often gets sort of lost in the conversation is that, especially even on the traditional OPM side, but we all sort of decide to work with these schools, not just because they say, hey, we want to hire you. We have to be convinced, and especially in the full rev share model, you have to be convinced that that can be successful. I know when I was at Pearson, my group was alongside the online services group, so I wasn't in the OPM group, but we would get their feasibility studies, and they were far more rigorous than anything I've ever seen a school do internally and even outside consultancies do for them, because they have to be convinced that that's profitable, right? Their stakeholder, the OPM has to show that that's that they can succeed, and the egg on their face would be reputationally dangerous, but also very financially dangerous. And it always occasions an important conversation. It says to those schools, well, if this isn't going to work, then your ambitions, you need to consider these in different ways. ways about what you might do. And that's really healthy for the school. That's not a process that tends to happen without a partner who's rigorously considering those things. So, those companies tend to choose their partners as much as their partners choose them. That's a good thing.
And I want to echo Lauren's comments on the intent of the individuals inside an OPM organization. When you get to know who your partner might be, get to know their DNA and their culture, you want to find that DNA match, right? Like ancestry or whatever. But if you can find that fit, people that truly care about the same things you do, oftentimes we're working on this side of higher education because we've worked inside the fence in many cases, and we're able to move the needle fast enough in the role we were in. And so now we get to be agents of change. And many of you, when you're inside the institution, you want to be that. So if you're looking for a job, many of us are hiring. I think that, and Lauren, to your point, there's no ill intent on any side. We care about the students. We care so deeply about their success. That's why we do this work. And so, yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure we.
No, I love it, and just to share one statistic that I follow closely, in the 25 years that Wiley has been in a partnership, we've graduated with our institutional partners almost 50,000 students. I mean, it's wonderful. They are changing the lives of their family, and that's really why we're here. And we feel so passionate about, yes, it's a business, but we feel very passionate about the noble purpose of higher education because we're changing the lives of families.
All right. Ron, I'm sensitive to the time we have left.
Yeah,
know
I think we covered some of this.
I think so too. I'm wondering if, given the time we have left, I wonder if we should just jump to the last question.
Let's see. Oh, well, I guess that was it. We've dealt with the differentiation. So
that's what I'm thinking. So the last question I have for you, you could call it the crystal ball question, right? Which is, what do you expect to be happening in this space over the next 5 years? And, what do you anticipate doing some new things? And is there anything that you can tell us now that you're going to stop doing?
This is the magic 8-ball question. Make it go. All answers point to yes.
Yes, right, exactly.
I think more and more we're going to see niche-focused areas. We're going to see differentiation in the OPM sector that will continue to present itself. And those competencies, I think you're going to find that there are going to be RFPs and other things that will actually call for different providers to come together. And then the other piece is, I think universities are looking more and more for a McKinsey type consultative approach to just come alongside a university and help them build capacity instead of stripping the university of those components and keeping it inside a company. So that's really one of the hypotheses that we came to build iDesign on, is that if we could help our university partners build capacity and not need us anymore, that was actually a good thing. Our very first contract was with Schreiner University in the Hill Country in Kerrville, Texas. And the whole idea was on the back of a napkin, literally a back of a napkin story. And that relationship was to launch a nursing program with all of the services, unbundled fee-for-service, with dates, target dates of when those services would no longer be needed, because they would be able to staff it and train the person that would take over the responsibilities. And it's that kind of solution that I think will become more prevalent in the marketplace.
I'll focus on three things. I think one, we're going to see a lot more diversity in financial models. We're already seeing, as Lauren said, knows better than I do, just what companies like Wiley are experimenting with. Noodle Partners has done a lot of this. They're mixing the models. I think you're going to see fee-for-service providers. Often finances are the barrier, so how might income share agreements and other third-party financing options? Because a lot of that financing is crucial. A lot of times that's going to determine the decision, and that startup costs or what risk they're willing to take, where it sits on their balance sheet, that's a big determinative factor. But more and more, as they see this as an important core future for the institutions, not doing it is less and less of an option. So finding the money to do it or making some tough decisions around doing it. And so I think we'll see more options. I think you're going to see more attention to the full range of the student life cycle as well. We can't be building master's programs forever. Well, we can probably, but that's not where the growth is going to be. And I think, to you, a company that hasn't come up, at least by a name, explicitly in this conversation, their purchase of a boot camp provider and some workforce development partnerships. I think you're understanding that student journey. If you look at their their annual report this year, they start off with a continuum of the entire student life cycle journey. And you can just see them starting to think ahead about where they go there. We certainly think about it too. We're building a lot of alumni programs, a lot of pre-matriculation programs, professional development programs for new demographics, right? That learning expertise is so needed, and this idea of the lifelong learner has really captivated folks and starting to take shape. And these online capabilities that schools have built are going to become so important. And then I think finally, and I think it's maybe akin to this too, because these capacities are core, that's why this conversation about capacity building is so important. We're going to start to see it, and you see some of this in the CHLOE report. A lot of people talk about blended, but they're not really doing it. That's got to change. As instructional design, attention to the learning experience as a holistic entity becomes part and parcel of what we do in online, you're going to see that absorb back into the institution. We're already seeing this with some of our partners. Oh, your admissions are better than ours. We'd set up this online unit. Congratulations, you now own on-campus admissions. That's starting to happen in course design too, both as a set of differentiating offers for your potential students, but also just as efficiencies administratively. So that's going to start trickling in, and I think you'll see a lot of it, more of it in face-to-face and in blended. Sorry, Lauren.
No, and I would echo all of that, and a couple different elements. I'm curious to see how higher education is going to respond to initiatives in the labor market. Are we going to start to see a few more innovative degrees and really focus on the skill types needed of our students, very much carrying on to that student journey? I do think we're also going to still find that schools want to more and more build their own courses, and there's capacity for that, and where it sits. They've got amazing instructional designers on universities. We've worked with them. And much to Whitney, we want them to be able to support their faculty. But I think we still may see that struggle over the next 5 years or so to really make sure they're staffed accordingly to be able to support the faculty where they are and really bring that sense of timeliness to completing a course and having it ready to go for that student when they're in there. That idea of online learning and having that course ready to go and have it really be well-tuned, that's still going to be an expectation. So I do actually think we'll see change, but I'm anticipating incremental. I look back over the last 12 years, and while there's been a lot of change, it hasn't moved as fast as it feels like it is. I think there's more discussion around it, which makes it feel much more palpable and urgent. But the same discussions around curriculum development and contracts that we had 12 years ago, we're still having today. And so while it feels momentous, I'm not so sure that we'll see incremental changes. Ron,
Well,
I think you were going to say
part
something.
of what Lauren is observing there has to do with the fact that the whole online learning community is not moving in lockstep. There are institutions that have been at this for 20 years now, and there are others who are still asking, how do we get started? And everything in between. So that creates a lot of opportunities. But I was struck by some of the language everyone was using about helping institutions build capacity. You don't expect to be there forever, that you may help them make those initial decisions, set them on the right path, and so on. And of course, I immediately thought of an analogy to our host organization today, Quality Matters, where institutions join, they learn about our principles, they study our rubric, they design courses, and they may have some of them reviewed and approved to meet our standards, but we can't expect to hold them forever as clients. Either we have to think ahead to meet other needs that they may have, or we need to dip back into the pool of the community that isn't ready yet or hasn't been exposed yet. And I'm just curious about whether you see in your internal planning those kinds of challenges ahead for your organizations.
I don't know that I see them as challenges as much as opportunities. I mean, just because the university partners that and we're working across a spectrum of different types of relationships, from programs that already exist that need to be redesigned, programs that are coming online for the very first time, thorough analysis and discovery documentation to help somebody do something that's very outside their comfort zone so that they can learn how to do that well. I see every project as an opportunity to do something else at some other point with that player. So we have partners that we've worked with for a period of time that have gone away because they had other work to do or another project. The project we were working on ended. Mm-hmm. They went off to go do something else. We worked with the Mayo Clinic. They spent 6 months deploying an electronic medical records program, EPIC, and now they're coming back wanting us to do more development work. So I think there are going to be relationships like that, but then there's always a new university knocking on the door with a new project.
I think we're about out of time. Is there a burning question in this group? Yeah, well, we'll be here for a few minutes if anyone wants to come up to the table. Thank you all.